Hey everybody, how are you doing? This is Kirsten here, and you are tuning in to A Better Way with Kirsten Kimura podcast. If you're watching this right now on YouTube, I would really appreciate if you could leave this video a thumbs up and if you could subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it yet. And if you're listening to it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, there you can leave me a 5-star rating and a review. That would be really, really helpful and helps me to get the word out about this podcast better. Also, if you're not a member of my Fit and Fuel Facebook group yet, please join that as well for weekly inspiration and tips and tools and so on. Speaking of tips and tools, so today I'm going to talk about nutrition again, and I'm going to bring you a couple of examples of how you can um, make it easier to hit your goals. So let's say that you are tracking your macros because this is what you are doing. If you are working with me or following me, you likely also are tracking your macros, but sometimes you might be struggling and hitting them is difficult. You may be struggling with protein, you might be struggling with being accurate, and many other things that can come up. And of course, I have talked about this topic a lot on this podcast, but today I wanted to go over a couple of these things again and also talk about what has been coming up with some of my newer clients. So if you are a newer listener or you are just new to this thing called macronutrition, these questions may have come up for you as well. So I hope that my clients' experiences, the questions that they have asked, that these will also help you because I'm going to answer these questions today. Because let's be honest, it has to be pretty accurate. The tracking needs to be accurate if you want to get results. This is how it works. And it does take some time and effort. So I want to make sure that you get it right pretty quickly when you start doing it. Of course, everybody will have a little bit of a learning curve at the beginning. You may not be used to it at all. And of course, I also know that some people just can't do it. They don't, it feels like this is not doable for me. This is too much time spent and I just don't like it. Okay, that's fine. But if you have chosen to do it with macro tracking, then here are some tips that will be helpful for you. So the first one is that it is a lot easier to track your food, to weigh and measure it when you are making meals that have individual ingredients. So for example, if you have a meal that has some eggs and some ground turkey and some avocado and some Brussels sprouts and some rice. So I literally told you what I had for lunch today. So this was my lunch. And this meal is relatively easy to log because you can take all these individual ingredients and then weigh them and put them on your plate. And of course, log them before you eat. Now, compare that to something that is more like a mixed meal, right? So it's made in one pot and it has all kinds of different ingredients. Let's say it has some ground beef and has some beans and potatoes and some other vegetables and tomato sauce and all kinds of different things. And now you make this big pot of food and you're thinking, how can I track this? Of course, you can track it. The way you can do it with using MyFitnessPal is that you put in the entire recipe, right? You log in the recipe and then you can tell the app, okay, one portion or one serving is 1/8 of the meal, okay? And then you service of 1/8. So this is how you can do it, but it's never going to be exactly as accurate as logging foods with individual meals. So last week I got a question, okay, I'm going to make this pasta dish that has ground beef and pasta and some roasted vegetables in it and tomato sauce and mix it all together. How can I make sure that I'm accurate with it? And my advice here would be really to weigh these ingredients for yourself individually and then mix them on your plate, right? And for everybody else in your family, you can, create this mixed meal and they can serve themselves however much they want because they are probably not tracking. But if you are tracking, you're going to be a lot more accurate when you are logging each food individually. Again, I understand that this takes work and effort, but this is how it works out the best. And if you want to get results, this is how I recommend that you do it. So meals with individual ingredients that you can separate and weigh each one separately, these will absolutely be easier to track. And because they are easier to track, they're more accurate, you are less likely to be off, right? Because let's say that you have that big pot meal and you serve yourself, you think, okay, this is about 1/8, then maybe you're over a little bit, maybe you're under a little bit. But weighing individual ingredients would definitely be more accurate. Of course, this is not to say that you cannot make those meals that are like one pot big meals, but this is not as easy to track and not as accurate. The second thing that I want to mention that I've seen coming up lately with my work with my clients is that a lot of people like to use these pre-packaged meals. And even if there's something like, okay, this is healthy, this is fine. Let's say like an egg wrap from Trader Joe's, or I've seen some smoothies from Trader Joe's, or some kind of overnight oats, right? So yes, we can scan the barcode and say, okay, this is exactly the same food that I had and it should work. However, what's really important to know is that food companies are allowed to be off, and they're allowed to be off actually a lot. It's about 20%. So 20%, is it even 25? I think it's 20%. So imagine that you have something that you thought is 200 calories, but it's actually 20% more, right? Or something that is even larger. Let's say that you ate like a burrito and had a barcode and it said that this is 600 calories, but it was actually 20% more, right? So this is where big differences can come in, especially if you have a couple of those prepackaged meals per day. So it doesn't matter that they are healthy, they have good ingredients. Still, it is a lot better if you can create or make your foods at home for the most part and don't rely on these foods a whole lot, because it can cause some inaccuracies. And then you might be wondering, why am I not getting the results? Why is the scale not moving or the measurements are not moving? Well, it can be because you ate 3 meals like that, right? That came in a package pre-made, and then who knows, maybe you were eating 300 calories more per day. And that's why you're not getting the results. So you are going to be a lot more accurate when you make your own food and log exactly what you made. The next thing, and this is for those who struggle with protein. So you have to know what the high protein foods actually are and what are not high protein. And actually, I'm going to read you an example from one of my posts that I did recently. So a lot of times people think that nut butter, for example, is a high protein food, and I wish it was, and it's not. Nut butter or nuts, right? So when you ask people, what was your protein source? They'll be like, oh, nuts. No, nuts are actually not high protein source. Nuts are more like high fat. It even has carbohydrates, but it's not so much protein. Then sometimes you may have heard, yeah, quinoa is high protein, but again, it is not. I'm going to prove in a second why it's not. Quinoa is mostly carbohydrates, and yes, it can help to supplement your protein intake because it does have protein in it, but it's not mainly a high protein food. Same can be said for example, hummus. For some reason, hummus has sometimes been advertised as high protein food, and it is definitely not a high protein food. So let me give you an example here, and I'm reading this from my post. So let's say that your goal is to get, about 30 grams of protein per meal, which should be your goal. I actually even prefer get 35, 40. That would be great. But let's say that now you want to get even just 20 grams of protein from peanut butter. So in order to get that, you would have to eat 6 tablespoons of peanut butter, which may sound really delicious, but you got to realize that, okay, now you got 21 grams of protein, but you also got 45 grams of fat and 600 calories. So you can see that it's not high protein food. It is mainly high fat food. Imagine 45 grams of fat, and this is more than half of what most of you are eating right now, right? Or should be eating right now. The other example that I gave you is quinoa. So 3 cups of cooked quinoa gives you 24 grams of protein. Sounds okay, that's good. But when we look at it, 3 cups of quinoa also has 118 grams of carbohydrates and total of 665 calories. So you can see that no, this is not a high protein food, it's actually a high carbohydrate food. Now, when you compare these foods to foods that are actually rich in protein, such as beef, chicken, fish, Greek yogurt, I mentioned fish, but other seafood too, pork even though it is fattier, then you see that there's a big difference. So for example, when you eat 4 ounces of beef, chicken, fish, or seafood, you will also get about 20, 30 grams of protein, but about 200, 300 calories. So remember, we compared that to like 6 tablespoons of peanut butter that gave you, 600 calories and 45 grams of fat. Or we compared it to 3 cups of quinoa, which gives you 665 calories and 118 carbohydrates, you see that you're way better off. You're actually looking for true high protein food. You're way better off eating your 4 ounces of beef, chicken, fish, or other seafood. Yes, it depends on the cut, like what part of the the animal you are eating. But generally speaking, they're about 200, 300 calories. And let's bring another example in here, which would be Greek yogurt. So most typical serving size is 3/4 of a cup, which is 170 grams of Greek yogurt, which gives you about 18 to 20 grams of protein, depending on which yogurt you get, and gives you only 110 calories. So you can see that you have to learn which foods are actually high protein, and that will help you now to increase that protein, because this is really hard for a lot of people. They are struggling, like, okay, where do I get that protein? And you just have to learn, okay, first to go to the chicken, beef, pork, seafood, right? This is your real high protein food. Also, like I mentioned, Greek yogurt. Also, well, eggs, of course, have a little bit of fat, but if you want pure protein, then egg whites are really helpful to keep in the fridge. I add them to my scrambled eggs almost every day when I have them. So these are actually the high protein foods. So make sure that you get plenty of those, and you notice that your protein is getting a lot easier. So it's not going to be so much a struggle anymore to figure out how to get that protein. Okay, so your nuts and nut butters and quinoa and oats are actually not high protein foods at all. Okay, then the next thing I want to remind you is that it is important that you eat mostly real food. Okay, mostly real food, it is better for your digestion for sure, and it is better for nutrient wise, right? Because it's not only that we are tracking macros here, we also want to make sure that you get value as far as like micronutrients, vitamins that are in those foods. So real food provides a lot more of those, right? So if you want to feel good, if you want to have better energy, you want to give your body the minerals that it needs, and minerals are extremely important for the body, for it to function properly, recover properly, then you want to make sure that you eat mostly real foods. And I I don't typically give people like super hard guidelines, like how much, but I would say you probably heard the rough guideline of 80-20 rule, right? So 80% of real food and 20% of packaged or whatever you like. This is a pretty good ratio, but of course, if you can move it towards more like 90-10, that would be even better. It's just you notice the difference in yourself, you notice the difference in your digestion, even maybe in your skin, in your brain fog, all that, when you eat more real food. Now, that said, I don't think it's necessary to avoid all processed foods or not having like any sugar or anything like this. And just today, I had a great example. Somebody sent me a message and said, "Hey, like I'm so excited that my scale is going down. She has now gone down from 236 pounds to 212 pounds, and she said I'm in this cut, and I still have plenty of macros. And just this weekend, I had some ice cream because it fit in my numbers, and I was so happy that I don't have to restrict myself. And I think this is a great example. Now, like I said, mostly real foods, mostly healthy foods. But if you want to have that little bit of sweet there, this is not a problem. Absolutely not a problem. And actually, in my opinion, what I've seen with most people is that when they allow yourself a little bit of this uh, nutritional relief, let's say, then they actually do better with their overall plan, because they don't feel so deprived. They don't feel like, oh, I can't have this and that. And then it builds up this like really strong intensity around food and more chances of binging. So if they have this little bit, something that takes the edge off every now and then, this is totally fine. And I've shared this before too, for myself too. Like if I want to eat some chocolate, I want to eat it. I want to eat some every day, but I'm not going to town like absolutely like go and eat everything that I have. No, it's just like a couple of squares a day, and that makes me happy, and that's like really good for me. Versus when I was really dieting super hard, I wouldn't even call it dieting. I was just starving myself. That was like well over 10 years ago. Then I would just like not allow myself to have these things ever. And I ate really low calories. Now, when I binged, then I binged. So this happened like couple of times every month. And when I say binge, I don't mean like I ate 2 cookies. I mean I don't want to even describe this because it was ugly. It was really bad. I had a bad eating disorder back then, which was like, I was completely binging and then depriving and binging and depriving. So this cycle, because I never let myself to have anything that would take the edge off, so to speak, because I thought I have to be eating so clean all the time. Now, I'll say that there's some people who might feel like they do better differently. They feel like, okay, if I don't have any sweet or any sugar or any of these snacks at all, I feel my best and I stay on track better. Maybe, that's a personal, everybody should know themselves well enough. But I do think, and this is my experience too, with working over 4 years with people, and also including my own experience, more people actually can be moderate around their sweets if they just learn this skill and they learn that, okay, this takes the edge off and I don't binge. There are less people, again, in my experience, who need to completely say no to all of the sweets in order to stay on track. So you got to know yourself. But if you have always said that I cannot do moderation, I just absolutely cannot, then this is just something that you could explore. Is this really true? And maybe start practicing a little bit of moderation. Okay. And one more thing, actually, two more things that I want to say: how to make your tracking easier and more accurate. One more very, very important thing is this, that you gotta log your foods before you eat them, okay? So sometimes I see people, they ate their meal and they start thinking in their head, what did I have? And then they're like, I don't remember what I had on Saturday. And of course you don't remember what you had Saturday. But I don't even want you to think about like, okay, 3 days later, I'm gonna log it. Even the same day, even in the same day, it has to be logged before you eat it. And otherwise you're guessing. You're trying to remember. And let's say that you had a meal that had 5 ingredients and you put them on a scale and then you ate before you logged it. There's a very, very small chance that you remember exactly how much of what you had. So it is so important. And it's not important to me as a coach that you send me like reports like, oh, what I did. I think I did this. I think I hit this number. No, this is not how it should be. It should be like, okay, here are your macronutrients. You're going to work with these, and I want you to hit these numbers. So you got to remember that these are your goals, right? So you don't do it backwards. You don't do it like, oh, I went over, right? No, you gotta know before what's going to happen, because you gotta log the food before you eat. So I want this to be really clear. It has been a little bit surprising to me how sometimes it can be hard to understand, because to me it makes a lot of sense, right? If you want to stick with these numbers that you have been given, then you have to pre-plan a little bit, and then you have to log ahead of time so that the numbers don't come as a surprise to you. Oh, oops, I stayed like under my protein by 30 and went over my carbs by 50. Right? We don't want surprises like that. That really shouldn't happen, because otherwise, really, this is a waste of your time. You got to be accurate with your tracking and hitting your numbers, and not just one day a week, 2 days a week, but all the time, right? All the time. As long as you are, going through your Pathos program. Of course, sometimes life happens. It happens to almost everybody. I can only think of maybe a couple of people who I've ever coached who have been like on point every single week, day after day. It is very rare. So most everybody has this when they're either on a vacation or they got sick or they ate out or something happened where they couldn't be accurate. Most people have this. So when I say be consistent, it really means like 95% of the time you got to do it. Okay, so the last thing that I want to say is that if you have a meal out, if you know that you're going to eat out tonight, dinner, then the best thing to make this work with your number is to track it first. So I know that it's not always possible to know what you're going to have, but if you have an idea, right, you know where you're going, and let's say that you're going to, I always use Thai food as an example because that's my favorite. So let's say that you're going to a Thai food place, Thai restaurant, and you always have pumpkin curry with chicken. Again, my own personal favorite. So you go there, you know that, okay, tonight I'm going to go out and have that. Then put that in already earlier in the day or even the day before, so that now you see, okay, it's not going to be so accurate, but you're going to estimate, right? And now you see what you have left for your breakfast and lunch, because you already know how much space, macro space, that dinner took, right? So you're going to log that first, and then you see, okay, I have to, maybe adjust a little bit about my breakfast, or have a little bit less lunch, because the dinner that you eat out is likely higher in macros, or at least, fat if you eat chicken curry, pumpkin curry. So this is also important that you keep in mind. So think ahead where I'm going to go. Again, this is not going to be ideal all the time, every time, 100% of the time, but as much as you can do that, and you notice that everything gets a lot easier. Because if you don't do it and you have your normal day, you log your breakfast and lunch, and you're like, oh, I don't know what I have left over for dinner. And then you realize that you only have like 300 calories left for dinner. That's probably not gonna fit your chicken curry with Thai restaurant. So you have to be mindful and log that ahead of time before you go. Okay, so these are my tips for you. Let me read them to you one more time. So number one, it is always easier to log meals with individual ingredients versus like big pot meals. Number two, pre-packaged meals and their food labels might be off about even 20%. So don't have too many of them. Number three, know what the high protein foods actually are so that you hit your protein effortlessly, or at least with less effort. Number four, eat mostly real foods, roughly 80-20 rule here. Number five, that said, continuing the last point, that said, some treats are absolutely fine, and you don't have to say complete no to sweets and sugar, because sometimes these things actually keep you on track better, because you get that little bit of nutritional relief all the time. And then log before you eat. This was number six. And number seven, prepare for the meals that you're going to eat out. Okay, I hope that this simple podcast episode today was helpful for you if you are tracking your macros. Thank you for watching and listening. Again, I would really appreciate that 5-star rating and review if you liked this episode. Also, if you're interested in working with me, please reach out to me anywhere. It can be YouTube comments, it can be on Instagram, or wherever you can find me. Facebook, also Vittenfield Facebook group as well. All right, thank you so much for being here today, and see you in the next episode. Take care.